What's up everybody, welcome back. So today we're going to continue working on our inventory system and we're going to do some optimization, and we're also going to take a look at two issues that we're still having. If we die and respawn, our inventory system isn't working, and if we are playing our open world level, we also have some problems with the inventory and pickups that we need to fix. So that's what we're going to do today. Before we start, I'd like to mention, if you want to get your hands on the project files, you can become a member of the YouTube channel or become a Patreon, and then you will get access to the Discord, which will also give you access to downloads of this project file. And so with all of that stuff out of the way, let's dive into today's video. So let's start with our respawn issue. So as I mentioned, if we die and we respawn, our inventory system is not working for the player that respawned. So the inventory is not loaded and the widgets are not working either. So we're going to look into that. If we open our inventory component controller, we're going to take a look at why this is happening. So first of all, if we die and we respawn, we keep our controller and we only get a new pawn that we possess. So over here in event begin play on the controller, we get a reference to our inventory component character, but this component is not valid anymore because we have a new pawn and we also have a new component. So this reference is not valid anymore, and we also don't fire up this event, which will make sure that our inventory is actually loaded on the character component. So we need to fix those two things. So first of all, if we go to begin play, we want to disconnect it right after setting our player controller. So let's just disconnect everything. So our player controller is still valid. This one doesn't change. If we die and respawn, we keep our controller, so the reference also is still the same. So we want to create a new custom event for this part. So let's create one. And I'm going to call it something like a character spawn. And now we don't need this isServer branch. So we're going to get rid of that one. And then we can plug this one in directly to the isValid node. So we're going to make sure we call this on event possessed. And that will also run or only run on the server. So we don't need our isServer branch. And then at the end we have our isLocal component check, and we can get rid of that, to be honest. So over here we do need to make sure that we plug in our player controller again. So that was hooked up to the setter, so make sure you plug in a new getter. So we have this part set up, and then we want to take a look at the setup inventory save game event. So we're going to change this a little bit. We're going to disconnect the input over here, and we want to make this a separate variable. So let's just drag off the input, do promote variable, and then we can get rid of the setter. And we simply want to plug it in directly. For the event, we're going to delete the input. And then, so currently we were calling this from our player controller, and that was called from the local controller, and right now we're going to call it from our server's instance. So we want to replicate it to the owning client. So for server setup inventory save game, we're going to set run on owning client. There we go. And then we want to make sure that we add a call to this event right at the end of the character spawn event that we created earlier. So setup inventory save game. So this part should be good to go. Now we want to compile and save it. And then we're going to open our framework player controller. So the shooter player controller. And in here, so if we go to our load profile event, so this will actually fire right at the moment that our player controller enters the new level. And this will make sure that everything is loaded, so the player profile, the game state, the player state, and all that kind of stuff. And so if we look at our shooter game mode, So this is just to explain what's happening. So if we go to our event handle starting new player, so the first thing we do is call our load profile event on the player controller we were just checking out. And then right over here, we check if everything is loaded on that controller. And then we spawn our new character. So our event possessed will never be executed before this event over here. We made sure it just runs in that order. So we can make sure that over here, we can just get rid of the call to the setup inventory save game and simply make sure that we set our new variable. So drag off the component controller and we're going to set our player profile slot name. Let me see. Oh, the inventory slot name. So that's not really a correct. Okay, so we have inventory slot name with an underscore and we have inventory slot name over here. So this is the one that we promoted to a variable. We want to make sure that this is actually the player profile slot name. So that's my bad. There we go. So we want to plug in the player profile to add it to the inventory underscore over here. And that's going to be the inventory slot name. So then on the player controller, we can just set this string variable. So set player inventory, player profile slot name. So I'm getting confused now. So we simply need to plug this in over here and make sure that we continue to the has authority switch. And then for our event possessed for the controller, so that's over here, we're simply gonna add the call to our character spawn event. So we want to drag in our inventory component controller and then simply call the new character spawn event that we just created. So this will make sure that we respawn with the inventory system loaded as well. So this will call the character spawn event. This will replicate it to the owning client to load our inventory save game. This reference is still valid and we made sure that this is set before it's actually executed by our shooter player controller over here. So that should work. Let's compile and save it. And let's continue on our other issue. Let's tackle the open world level next. So we need to make sure that everything for the level is loaded and the players are actually spawned before we start doing some stuff on our inventory, and that's why not everything is working currently. So first of all, let's go to our inventory component for the game mode. And if we look at the event graph over here, so basically we want to disconnect it right after the initialize game world save. So just disconnect the execution pin. And then for these getters, we can just get a separate getter and move everything over for the save game world. So this we want to make sure it still executes on begin play. So it sets the game world save game and the correct game world string over here. And then we need to make sure that we start doing this stuff. So this will actually run replicated events. And if there's no clients spawned yet, for example, so the server spawns faster than the clients because it takes longer to load the level, the server cannot replicate to those clients because they simply don't exist yet. And we also need to make sure that the level is actually loaded before the game mode over here starts doing stuff to actors that haven't spawned yet. So we're going to create a custom event over here. And we can call this something like initialize save game, initialize inventory. And simply make this a separate event. And then if we go to our game mode, so the framework shooter game mode, Then we want to look at the event handle starting new player again. And at the end, we're simply going to add a call to our initialize inventory function or event right after all the players have actually spawned. So we can simply grab our GameMode Component and then call our initialize inventory and simply plug it in at the end. So this is the solo branch over here. So that's the branch all the way at the top. And then we also need to make sure that we grab the middle branch. So if the game has not started yet, game started false. And over here all the way at the end for the, let me see, endless wave, free for all and survival game modes. We need to plug it in all the way at the end over here. So right after the switch on game modes for the level start events and then after the game has started. And if we go back a little bit, we have our team deathmatch branch over here. And we also need to plug it in at the end over here. So we don't need to worry about the third branch, which is when the game has started and the server already did all of this stuff. So the client doesn't need to make sure it happens again. So this is good to go. We can ignore the other branch and just save and compile. So let's run a little check to see if those things are working now, and then we can start doing some optimization. So first of all, let's check our open world level, and then we have to load a different game because we can't kill each other in the survival game mode right now. So the open world level, let's see if our pickups are loading in properly. So everything spawned, we have 2 orbs, 2 vents, we have a container here with some contents. And we have weapon pickups. So that seems to be working and everything is loading. So for the server, it's also working. So that should make our pickups work in the open world or bigger levels. So let me relaunch the game and set up a PvP lobby so we can test the respawning. So I'm launching a free-for-all match right now. And we should be able to check out if this is working as well. So first of all, let's check. We can open our inventory. I have a dish in here for the client, so that should be good. Our server has the inventory widget working as well. We see some pickups, so that should be good to go. So let me kill the client. There we go. And now I forgot to set the respawn delay, so we have to wait 10 seconds. That's my bad. So let's respawn, and right now we still have our inventory working. So previously the widget wouldn't appear, and currently the save game is also loading, so we still have the dish in our inventory. So we fixed the respawning as well. That should be good to go. So now we can start doing some optimization stuff. So for the optimization, I want to start with looking at our data tables and then especially using soft object references. So right now, if we would right click one of our data tables, so for example, the pickup item info, and we use the reference viewer, then over here. So on the right side, you can see all of the assets that are being referenced by our data table. And these are all hard object references. And that means these will be loaded into the memory as soon as we use our data table. And you might not need all of them because you don't use all of the pickups, or you don't need all of them at the same time. So for example, pickups could be far away in the level and you don't need the meshes loaded, or you don't need the icons loaded if the HUD is not open, or things like that. So this is not really resource friendly if we use our data table. So we want to make sure we turn these into soft object references. And that means we still know what object we are talking about, but it's not loaded in the memory. So the class of that object is not accessible. So we cannot actually do anything with it until we load it. And we can tell the game when to load it. So that's what we're gonna do. And we're going to start with our container data table because that's the one that has the least in it. So we only have a container mesh in here. So we're going to change this. First of all, let's make sure that everything is saved, and then we're going to change our container types structure. So in here we have the static mesh. We want to change it into a static mesh and then a soft object reference. So if we scroll down, on the right side over here, you can select the soft object reference. So let's select that one. So over here, if you hover over it, it doesn't really mention it's a soft object reference. You can only see it by the color over here for the icon that changed. So that's a tiny bit annoying, but okay, this is set up and good to go. So we can save the structure. And then we want to make sure that we close down our project and don't save all of the referenced assets. So don't save it and reopen the project. So we're back. If we do it like this, we don't run the risk of the structure corrupting and breaking our project. So this is done. Now we need to fix our BP container. So if we open this one up, we need to correct our construction script because right now we have our soft object reference and we cannot just set it directly for the set static mesh. So to make this one work, we need to use a latent node, and we cannot do that in our construction script. So what we want to do, go to the event graph, and in here we're going to create a new custom event. And I'm going to call this load static mesh. So we're going to give this event one input, and that's our new mesh, and then the soft object reference. So we're going to use a static mesh. And then select the soft object reference over here. So from the soft reference, you can drag off and then do async load asset. So as you can see by the little clock over here, this is a latent node. So this means the upper pin will continue execution immediately, and the completed pin will fire when the asset is actually loaded in the memory and good to go. So over here, it returns an object, and we do need to cast this. So we want to drag off here and we want to cast it to a static mesh. So I'm gonna convert this cast to a pure cast. It doesn't change anything except the look of the node. It just looks a little bit cleaner. It changes how the node works. So every time you connect up to a pure node, this node will fire again. But that's not really important right now. So I'm just doing it for the looks in this case, and then we can grab our container mesh and just set the static mesh. And we want to make sure that we connect this to the completed pin of the async load asset and plug in the static mesh like this. So this will load the mesh and then set it for the component over here. So then go back to the construction script. We need to get rid of this node and call our load static mesh event. Plug it into the row found pin and plug in our soft object reference over here, and then plug this in as well. Compile, save, and this should work for our container. So the only downside is right now, oh, it's actually working, no matter. I thought it might not load the mesh in the viewport over here, but that's still working, so we can still see our container as well. So that actually updated our data table. So let's double check our reference viewer right now. So nothing actually changed, but it's just not updating. So refreshing doesn't work. So let me go to the data table. I'm going to duplicate a row and remove it, save it. And then if I look at the reference viewer again, so you can see the static meshes are now purple or pink or whatever the color is. So these are soft object references right now, so they won't be loaded into the memory by default, only when you tell the game to do so. So if you only have a static mesh with a normal crate, it doesn't load the other mesh as well. So that's fixed, and we're going to do the same thing for our other data tables. So let's make sure that everything is saved, and then we're going to go to our pickup item info structure. And in here we have a static mesh, and we also have our HUD icon, the texture 2D. So both of them, we're going to turn those into soft object references as well. So this is a static mesh. And this time select the soft object reference. And for the texture 2D, do the same thing. So texture 2D, soft object reference. Let's save our structure and then close down our project. Don't save all of the related assets. And then reopen the project. So the project is back up. First of all, let's take a look at our BP pickup. And in here, we need to do the same thing in our construction script. So again, we need to make sure that we load our static mesh in a separate event and call it over here. So let's go to the event graph and create a custom event. Load static mesh. So give this the input of our new mesh. And that's the soft object reference. So static mesh. Soft object reference. And then drag off here and do async load asset. So we need to cast this object. So cast to static mesh. Again, I'm going to convert it to a pure cast just for the looks in this case. And then we can grab our pickup mesh over here and simply set the static mesh. And make sure that we connect it up to the completed pin and plug in the mesh over here. So go to the construction script and then replace our set static mesh node. So get rid of this one and simply call our load static mesh event. And use the soft object reference this time. Make sure that we plug everything back in. So this is good to go. And now the easiest thing we can do is grab our this node, so the get table row for the pickup item info. And simply right click, do find references. So there's only one in this blueprint, but we're going to click this binocular over here. And we can find all of the references in our project. So we're simply going to check every one of them and make sure that we fix everything. So we just did the BP pickup. Let's take a look at the inventory item menu. And over here, we're using our HUD icon. So we need to fix this as well. And this is inside of a function, and we can't use latent nodes inside of a function. Same thing with the construction script. So again, we need to go to the event graph and over here create a custom event. So let's create one, and this is going to be a load texture 2D. Or let's make it this, why not? So load texture 2D. Let's give it an input, and that's our new texture. And then that's a soft object reference, so texture 2D, and select the soft one. And we're going to do the same trick, so async load asset. Then we need to cast this to our texture 2D. Again, I'm going to convert it to a pure cast, and then we need to set the icon. So let's check the function over here. So that's the image icon. I'm just going to grab these nodes, go to the event graph, and I can paste them in here. Make sure you use the completed pin and plug everything in. So then go back to the function, update item menu, and at the end we're going to call our load texture 2D. And make sure that we plug it back into the data table, or the structure actually. And so that fixed our inventory item menu. And now let's take a look at what else we need to fix over here. So let's go back to the search results. And we have our inventory slot. So we're probably also using the HUD icon over here. So that's correct. And this time we are actually in the event graph. So we can simply load it over here. So let's make a little bit of room. And let's quickly clean this up a little bit. Well, let's move this over here, so that should do. So we have our event construct, and over here this is not working anymore, so we can disconnect this part over here. And then we can simply grab the HUD icon and we can async load asset. So plug this into the row found pin. So now we can use the upper pin to continue this execution immediately. So just plug that one back into the branch. And then for completed, we can set, no, we can't. We need to cast this first. So we're going to cast it to our texture 2D. Again, I'm going to use a pure cast, and then we can plug it back in over here into the set brush from texture. There we go. So this should work fine as well. So compile and save it. And let's take a look at the rest. So we have the inventory component game mode. And this is only using our stack size. So we don't need to worry about this one. Then we have the inventory component character. So that's also just using the stack size. So we don't need to fix anything in here. Inventory component controller. That's only using the name variable. So that's good to go as well. And then we have our throwable item. And we do need to fix this one. So in here we're using the pickup mesh. So we want to make sure that we change that. And then we also have, let me see. Oh no, that's another actor, so I'm a little bit confused. So we only need to fix up our construction script again. So what we're going to do, go to the event graph and do the trick we did a few times earlier. So let's create a custom event. And we want to load the static mesh. Plug in our soft object reference. So that's the mesh, and then the static mesh soft object reference over here. So we can async load asset and then cast it to the static mesh. Use a pure cast if you would like to, and then from the construction script we can grab the node. So that's the item mesh we need to set. And make sure we plug it into the completed pin over here and plug in the mesh. So then go back to the construction script. We can get rid of this one and simply call our load static mesh. And plug in the soft reference and connect this one back up. So now this should be good to go as well. And we updated our item info structure for soft object references as well. So let's compile and save. And then we can take a look at our inventory component for the game mode. So let's open that one up. And in here we have two arrays, one for the BP pickup and one for the BP containers in our level. And really the only things we use these arrays for is to determine the index of the current pickup or container that we're interacting with. And when that index we're using to access the actor info or the container info. So we don't really actually need the class loaded in here. We can just compare soft object references that will work, and then we don't need to access the actual class. So we're not doing that in the game mode at all. So for these two arrays, we can replace them with soft object reference arrays, and that will make sure that it's a little bit more optimized as well. So first of all, let's do the all saved pickup actors. I'm simply going to create a new array and call this saved pickup actors soft. So underscore soft. So this needs to be an array of our BP pickups, but this time we're going to select the soft object reference over here and make sure we turn it into an array. So now we can simply right click the alt array and find the references. and we want to update this stuff. So first of all, let's do the setup pickup actors. So this is the top branch in here. We get all actors of class and then we save it into our all saved pickup actors. So we're simply not going to do that anymore. We're going to get rid of the setter and then plug in the for each loop directly. And then inside of the loop body, we want to drag in our soft reference array and we can set an array element. So plug this one into the execution. We can grab the index from the for each loop, and then for the array element or the actual pickup, we can simply plug it in and it will convert it to a soft object reference for us. Make sure that we enable size to fit, and this should be good to go. So now we have the actual array with the soft object reference updating in here, and we're not saving this array anymore. Now if we go down into the other branch, we have an add node for the all saved pickup actors. So we're going to replace that with the soft ones as well. So let's drag in soft array and we're going to add an item to it. So we can move over the pins and this will convert it to a soft reference for us. Make sure that we grab the index from this node and plug the execution in so we can get rid of the old stuff. And that's good to go as well. So we are currently still loading the class in this function. So we have the array over here with the BP pickup. So this is a hard reference array. And these are also hard references over here. But as soon as this function is done running, there are no references to these local variables, because essentially that's what those are inside of this function. So if we don't save any references to that, they will be grabbed by the garbage collection and cleaned up. So this will only make sure the classes are loaded when the function is actually running, and then it will clean up some memory for us. So let's compile and save that one, and let's move down the list. So we also did the second one over here. So that was this node. And then we have one in the add saved pickup actors. So we can simply replace this one with the soft array as well. So let's drag it in and we're going to add a unique. And we can simply move the pins over and that should make everything work again. And get rid of the old stuff, and that's good to go. And then we have a removed saved pickup actor. So in here there's also two references. So let's grab the same soft array and we're gonna find an index, or find an item actually. Find item, and we can simply plug in the pickup and grab the index over here. So that's good to go, and let's take a look at the second one. So over here we remove the index, so just grab the soft array and replace everything. So remove index and move the pins over. And delete the old reference. So this is good to go. And now we should be able to just delete the old array with the hard references. We're not using it anymore. So if it's not complaining when you delete it, you are good to go. Now we're going to do the same thing for the container actors. Excuse me. So let's create a new variable for that as well. And that's going to be the saved container actors soft. Oh, really? Let's try that again. So saved container actors soft. And we want to turn it into our BP container soft object reference and make sure that it's an array. So then we're going to look for the old array. So find references. And we simply want to replace all of them. So let's just start at the top. This is the event graph. So for each loop, we need to make sure that we disconnect the array and the array element. So these will turn into wildcards again. and then we can grab our container actors soft array and plug it in. Now this time we actually want to execute an event on this actor, so we cannot use the soft object reference because we need to load it. We need to load the class before we can call this event. So we need to disconnect the loop body and we're going to async load asset. Plug that into the loop body. Then we need to cast this to our BP container. BP container over here. So I'm going to use a pure cast and then plug it in over here and make sure you use the completed pin and get rid of the old reference. So that's good to go. And let's take a look at the next one. So we have the add item to container, and in here we have our set array element. And to be honest, we don't actually need this node. So we're not changing the index of the container and we're not changing the actual container array either. So the easiest thing we can do over here is simply get rid of this node and only use the one for the container actors info. So just delete this part and then take a look at the other reference, and that's at the beginning of the function where we find the container. So over here we do want to replace it. So let's grab the soft array and we're going to find an item. Plug in our BP container so we can move over the pins like this and get rid of the old reference. So this is good to go. And then let's check the next function. So remove item from container. And in here, the same story applies. So we have our set array element node and we don't really need this one. So we're going to get rid of this one and just keep the one for the actor info. And then look at the other reference, and that's actually the find node. So we need to replace this one, grab the soft array, and we're going to find an item and just move everything over and get rid of the old stuff. So let's continue to the next one, setup pickup actors info. And this is similar to our setup. So this is setup container actors. So that's my bad. And it's similar to the setup pickup actors. So we have the top branch over here. We can get rid of the array setter and simply plug in this directly to the for each loop. And then at the end of the for each loop, we're going to grab the set array element for our soft array and simply plug everything into the loop body. So grab the index, grab the array element, and make sure you enable size to fit. And then if we look a little bit down in this event, we have the add node for also saved container actors, and we're going to replace that one as well. So grab the soft reference and add an item and just move everything over again. So we can get rid of the old stuff. There we go. So these two are fixed as well. And then we have our save container contents. So over here we have a find node we need to replace. So grab a new one for the soft reference. So, and get rid of the old stuff. And for the second reference in here, so all saved container actors, we can get rid of this one as well. Let me double check quickly. Yeah, this is similar to the other ones, so we're not actually changing the container array. We're just looking, using it to find the correct index for our container actors info. So there's no need to set up this set array element over here, and just keep the one for the actors info, and that shouldn't change anything at all. So compile and save, and we have the game mode updated for the containers as well. So now we can get rid of the old array with the hard references. And currently we have our soft object references in place over here as well. Close it down and let's make sure that everything is saved. So the last thing I want to do today is look at the other pickups that we still have. So we can use these for the free-for-all and team deathmatch game modes, for example. So if we go to gameplay loot and then for the BP pickup base, we're using the other data table. So let's make sure that everything is saved over here, and then we're going to change this structure as well. So let's open it up. And in here we have a static mesh, a skeletal mesh. So both of those we're going to change them to our soft object reference. So static mesh. And select the soft one this time. And do the same thing for the skeletal mesh. Turn it into the soft reference. So then we can save our structure and close down our project. And it didn't actually ask me anything, so that might be a little bit weird, but okay. So if it asks you to save other assets, don't save them. I'm currently reloading the project. And we're back up. So we changed the structure and now we can fix our BP pickup base. So let's open this one up. And in the construction script, we have our two new soft object references. So we need to fix this up a little bit more as well. So after we did this, we are also actually getting rid of an error that's saying that our pickup mesh is not valid because it's pending kill. So currently, if we are using an ammo pickup, the ammo pickups are not using a skeletal mesh or a static mesh, they use an FX. So we are trying to set a skeletal mesh that's actually being deleted. So if you use ammo pickups and you get the warning for the skeletal mesh not being valid if you load up the level, that should be fixed after this as well. So how are we going to do this? Well, this is the construction script. We can't use our latent nodes in here, so we need to create the functions for the load skeletal mesh and load static mesh. So let's do that in the event graph. Create a custom event, load static mesh, and then plug in the soft object reference to our mesh. So mesh, and select a static mesh. Oh, really? Soft object reference. So then, oh, come on. There we go. So we can use our async load asset node, and we need to cast it to our static mesh. So we can convert it to a pure cast if you would like to, and then grab the pickup mesh and simply set static mesh over here. So use the completed pin to make sure it's actually working and plug in the mesh. So need to do the same thing for the skeletal mesh. So let's create a second custom event and call this load skeletal mesh. Again, plug in the soft object reference, but this time to the skeletal mesh. So let's change this into a skeletal mesh. Soft object reference. So async load the asset and then cast it to the skeletal mesh again. So cast to skeletal mesh. Over here, I'm gonna use pure cast, and then we can grab the pickup mesh skeletal and set the skeletal mesh. So if you're using 5.1, this is called set skeletal mesh asset, I think. It's the same node, so you can use that one. So plug this in over here. With the two new events in place, we can go back to the construction script. And now we need to change this branch as well, because we are not using the hard references anymore. So for the upper branch, we can drag off the pickup mesh and simply do is valid soft object reference. So look for this node, plug it into the branch. So if our pickup mesh static mesh is a valid reference, we need to call our load static mesh. So we can get rid of the set static mesh node that was over here. From the through pin, load static mesh, and plug in the soft reference over here, and then continue like we used to for the upper branch. So if this is false, we want to double check if the skeletal mesh is valid as well. So we're going to drag off the false pin, add a new branch, and then drag off the skeletal mesh. Check if this is a valid soft object reference. Plug it in. And then we can get rid of the set skeletal mesh node over here. If this is true, we want to load our skeletal mesh with the new event that we created. Plug this one into the data table as well. Plug this one back into the execution. And then all we need to do is grab this add local offset for the pickup name. And I'm going to move it over to the bottom row. So from the false pin of the second branch, we want to plug it into the widget pickup name set local offset. And then make sure that the other two branches are still connected as well. So this is how it should be set up. So all of the branches should call this node as well. So this from the false pin and the other ones from the end. So that's how it was set up as well, except we added the second check over here that will make sure that the errors are gone. And we are using the soft reference. So now we can do a little test to make sure that everything is still working, and then we should be good to go for today. So let's launch a game. I'm going to use the survival game mode. So that was the one that had the most problems with the pickups initially. So if this one is working, we can kind of safely assume the others work as well. So I'm a client and everything is still loaded over here. So we have the meshes loaded, we have the pickups showing up on the inventory as well. So this is actually still saved from the previous time. And then, for example, the containers are still working and the weapon pickups are still over here as well. So this is good to go. Now, for example, if I would open up my widget and then pick up this fan, you will see there's actually a slide popping into place over here. So if I pick up the fan, it actually didn't really notice this time. But that could happen because we are using the latent nodes to load the assets. And then because the asset might not be loaded yet, you might end up with the white default square until the icon is actually loaded. So for example, you could use a small UI animation to just cover that 0.2 or 0.4 seconds. So you can play around with when and how you load the assets to make sure that you get rid of the popping in. But this will actually make sure that you free up a lot of resources, especially if you use data tables like we are doing. And then if we go to the weapons data table, for example, and look for the reference viewer over here, so you can see there's actually a ton of assets being referenced, and there's actually a lot more because this is only set for a maximum. So there we go. And you definitely don't want to load all of these assets all the time just because you are loading the data table. So this is definitely a good way of optimizing things. So if you increase the search depth, you will see how this actually increases. So this is kind of, yeah, we want to fix this. So for the multiplayer project, we're also going to take a look at this optimization part in another episode, because this is not the multiplayer project, but the inventory project. And then we're also going to fix up some multicasting and replace them with rep notifies and things like that. So there's a bit more optimization coming in the future. But for today, we are done. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, and I'll be back soon for more. talk to you later. Bye bye.